Hello everybody, my name is Richard Stashy and this is Tankard of Tales. I've been stuck in this Wendy theory rabbit hole for almost 2 years, probably even longer, I'm not even too sure. And it is a very fun type of rabbit hole to get stuck in because it's a lot of twists and turns and fun things that you learn about. How Stanley Kubrick created the movie, how he put things out there, how he put these little Easter eggs, and they're either intentionally, unintentionally. We're still trying to figure it out. My wife, on the other hand, she was really deeply involved in the Johnny Depp trial.
Sure.
To be honest, we're doing this a little bit late because we didn't want to.
We didn't want to flood the Depp and Heard, I don't know, bandwagon.
Well,
we're a little bouncing wheel behind it, I guess.
Yeah, we're a little bouncing wheel behind it, and we just want to throw a fun little theory out there.
I don't know if it's fun. I mean, some people might not think it's very fun, but just let's recap the Wendy theory a little bit, and I'll try my best because I think if you start talking about it, you'll never stop. And in the Shining movie versus the book, not to be confused with the other, some of the scenes we're seeing in The Shining are distorted versions of reality, paranoid hallucinations, and it's something that Richard calls an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Since you're seeing things in the perspective of the narrator, who, if you watch from the Wendy theory perspective, is Wendy. So it's a cool interpretation of the movie. It's an interesting way to rewatch the movie. In my opinion, it is a theory, not the one and only way to watch the movie. I think it would do an injustice to the movie to say this is the only way to watch the movie.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that there's a lot of possibilities. I mean,
sometimes you don't, but sometimes you do.
Yeah, sometimes I don't think there is, but then sometimes I do. It's wishy-washy.
So, as Richard mentioned, I did watch the Depp versus Heard trial. I tried to go into it without any preconceived notions of what I thought happened or how I thought it would come out. But with the Wendy theory fresh in my mind and hot on Richard's lips almost every day, something felt a little bit familiar as I watched and heard and learned of some of the details while they unfolded during the trial. But definitely after sitting on it for a while and talking about it with Richard, I think this might be a good example of life imitating art with this.
Yes.
And the arts in this being the Wendy theory.
Or The Shining as a whole.
So just sort of as a little bit of a disclaimer, I'm not, and neither is Richard, very much of this salacious celebrity gossip follower. But this was very different. From a legal perspective, for defamation, this was pretty much unprecedented because public figures normally don't win a defamation case. So this was interesting from that perspective. This also puts a pretty big spotlight on human nature, mental illness, addiction, among other things. And I don't know if we want to mention this, but sort of, after that whole trial happened, I kind of just got it reminded me a lot of the Fatty Arbuckle case from the 20s.
Oh, yeah. For those that don't know, Fatty Arbuckle was a comedian, a very huge, I guess pun kind of intended because he was a very big guy too, but he was a very huge comedian star during the silent film age. And what happened was that he had a party and a girl died in his room, and a reporter who kept on writing these stories about how he did things to her, his huge body weight crushed her and everything else like that, and made the public believe that he was like some sex maniac, killer, crazed lunatic out there. And the interesting thing is that one of the paths that got to the Hays Code that we were kind of stuck with for a good number of years. But he was wrongfully accused for these things. They found out that he was really innocent.
Yeah, but at the time there was no internet. There was no.
No, all the information came from the newspapers.
Everything came from the news, and even after he was found innocent, didn't they continue to roast him and
they did it for
his career, right?
They ruined his career so much that he had to use a assumed name to go back into Hollywood. He went under, I forgot the name that he went under, but he went under a different name.
Yeah. So how does this tie into the Wendy theory? Depending on how you've absorbed all the news, or if you watch the trial, what happened, it may seem like the story Amber is telling us just didn't happen the way she told it. I don't like to think that people can lie so easily about something so serious with such heavy consequences. So I try not to think that she's simply lying.
No, that's the thing. She's not simply lying, but I'm going to have to do a little spoiler thing because it amazes me how she herself did come out about she was taking some type of drugs. And it seems like very funny how people just kind of like glossed over these type of drugs that she was taking because it doesn't seem to be as serious as what other drugs are, I guess. But the type of drugs that she was taking is known for issues.
Yes, the drugs are a big part of the trial. Not just her drug use, but Johnny's drug use. And the difference was that she took a lot of psychedelics and hallucinogens. Johnny kind of stayed away from those, and he took a lot of cocaine. He did some pot, and he was like a drinker.
Yeah, and that's the point that I want to talk about is that she was taking mind-altering. Yeah, drugs. She was taking mind-altering drugs.
Yeah.
And I just found it kind of interesting how the courts and how everybody else was handling it during the case was like, this is not much of an issue. The issue is that Johnny Depp was doing cocaine.
Yeah, which both are huge. Like, drugs are bad.
Yeah, drugs are bad.
Yeah, some people can maybe take drugs in moderation, but I don't think anybody would disagree that drug use at the amount that they admitted to taking is way more than you should, and this is what they admitted to. You have to also understand that they probably took more than what we know.
Yeah, please note that people that will admit it, they're never going to really say how much they really took. I mean, as far as I know, Amber Heard probably has mushrooms on her desktop like Scarface had in the...
No. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what she admitted to, almost taking psychedelics every week. Which could be more or less. I don't know how... I've never done this stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's as much as normal people do stuff too. I don't know. It seems excessive to me. I'm not an expert on hallucinogens. Neither is Richard. But I have heard that you can go back into hallucinogenic states for years after consuming them, even if you've just done it once. Keep this in mind, knowing, okay, this is a woman who's constantly on these psychedelics and hallucinogens, and there's no threshold to how much she's taking.
Yeah, and that's the funny. That's, I'm not sure if the funny thing would be right, but that is the issue in hand.
Somebody could be wrong about something without lying, and I wondered while I was watching this, like, is it possible that when she has an argument or experiences a negative emotion, while she's on drugs or not, is it possible that she goes into this hallucinogenic state to cope, maybe remembers scenarios differently because the drugs affected her memory? Or is it possible that she dreams up the events, she can't tell her dreams from reality, and she doesn't know if these things ever really happened, or she thinks they did when they didn't? So it just seemed a little bit like she may have been on like this weird trip for the entire marriage, and she can't separate fantasy from reality.
I'm thinking that has to be a possibility.
Well, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. It sounds like two people whose lives were kind of thrown off course from them being together, and it's a sad situation no matter how you look at it.
Oh yeah, it's
But without making light of a troubling situation, there were some interesting similarities between the Depp versus Heard trial that while they were playing out, I couldn't believe what I was seeing in some of these cases. And it could just be, like I said, because I have The Shining and the Wendy theory on my mind. But I wanted to go through some of them. So without further ado, one of the first things we all noticed was the outfit mimicking.
yes.
So during the Depp versus Heard trial, some of the news stories were in articles and YouTubers were pointing out that there was something going on with Amber's outfits that seemed to mimic Johnny's or Dr. Evil.
Well, the first thing that started off like whatever Johnny wore
It seemed
on
she was
day
wearing,
1, she was wearing something similar on day 2
yeah.
to mimic the outfit.
I kind of think this was overblown a little bit. I mean, he wore a gray suit, she wore a gray suit.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there were some things that it was like, oh, did she really intend to do that? Well, what does that have to do with The Shining? Some people have pointed out that Wendy's outfit in the beginning of the movie mimics Goofy's outfit, and there's a doll or a sticker or something in Danny's room.
Yeah, there's a doll hanging by the window in Danny's room.
Hanging or sitting?
Hanging.
Okay.
It's like a puppet doll.
Okay. Well, either way, we don't know if this was intentional, like if she was just dressing like that because it was one of his favorite characters, or was it intentional on her part, or was it intentional on Stanley Kubrick's part?
It's intentional on Stanley Kubrick's part.
Maybe. The second similarity is what some people have called the boogeyman of the trial.
His good friend Marilyn Manson.
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 How would you describe that evening?
Awkward,
Why?
because Marilyn Manson was there.
So throughout the trial, Marilyn Manson keeps being brought up, sort of like a character in the shadows. No one really pointed out what his significance was in the trial, but there's some speculation that it was meant to be a guilt by association tactic, since Marilyn Manson is facing some pretty serious allegations of a similar nature to what Amber Heard accused Johnny of. I also think his presence was supposed to be indicative of particularly heavy slumps of drug use. I'm sort of equating the Marilyn Manson references to the spectral and sinister Grady character in The Shining, where, you know, Grady seems to pop up to entice Jack into going down a darker path, telling him how to correct his situation.
Yeah.
And I think that might be some of the implication with Marilyn Manson here, that he's showing up and putting some thoughts into Johnny's head. He's influencing him with his drug use, and, you know, he's making him go down a darker path. I don't know, maybe that's a stretch, but it seems...
No, it sounds really
The
good.
third similarity is there's a staircase incident that this trial seems to be revolving around. And for me, when I was watching it, this was one of the allegations and the scenarios where I was like, ugh, it's really hard to tell what happened here. So in the case, Johnny is pursuing her up the steps while they're having a big argument. There's some sort of scuffle, and there were witnesses to this scuffle, and they all seem to have different stories of what happened. But ultimately, everybody agrees. At the end of this staircase incident, where Johnny pursues her up the stairs, Johnny is the one that gets struck. I don't think that's much of a stretch to compare it to The Shining.
No, because that's what happens with Jack.
It
Jack
is.
is the one that gets struck down. Either he's trying to hurt Wendy, or he's trying to help Wendy. In the end, he got struck down.
Right. If you watch it through the Wendy theory perspective, you could imagine that he's trying to calm her down. Like, even if you don't put if you listen to the words he's saying and you don't put his demeanor to it, Wendy, darling, apple of my eye. something like that, right?
Yeah.
That might not actually be something he's saying sarcastically. He could actually be saying, please.
Yes.
Stop. I'm not
Please
going to hurt you.
stop. I'm not going to hurt you.
I'm just going to bash your skull in. And that's when she goes and she hits him because, is that what she sees? Who knows? This fourth similarity blew my mind. So much so that I had to tell Richard about it almost immediately. So, believe it or not, Amber testified that one of their fights started when she happened to come across Johnny's tablet device and saw a folder titled "No Fun for JD."
Did there come a time in this time frame that you found a folder on Mr. Depp's computer?
Yes.
What was it labeled?
It was on Johnny's opening page, his desktop. It said "No Fun for JD" in all caps.
JD being Johnny Depp, which contained a bunch of pictures of her and outfits that he disapproved of. And so that was another one. The next one, maybe it's a stretch, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So it's hard to think about The Shining without conjuring images of the ominous hotel elevators. And
the blood.
Yes, and the Depp versus Heard trial, an elevator is also playing a pretty big part.
There was? I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't watching the trial.
It's almost like it's a witness. The elevator is literally a witness to parts of this trial. There's footage of Johnny being agitated in the elevator, and there's some other footage where Amber is cozying up with other men. So
In the elevator?
in the elevator. So there's a lot of elevator footage. There's a lot of information gleaned from the elevator. I caught that as a similarity because you have the elevator in The Shining and you have the elevator in this, and they're both playing pretty big parts, if not visually, in another way. But I thought that was interesting. And another thing, so with the elevator, there's the seas of red, the blood.
Yeah, that's what I remember
yes,
hearing. There's
cascading from and pouring out of the elevator. So the elevator doesn't bleed in the Depp versus Heard trial, but there is repetition of copious amounts of red wine being purchased, poured, consumed, spilled, slipped on, and photographed. Perhaps enough to come flooding out of an elevator. I don't know, but red wine and blood.
It could be because that blood was very watery in The Shining.
It was. So from red wine to red rum, the next similarity is the iconic image from The Shining is the red rum written in lipstick on the mirror. And yes, the Depp versus Heard trial includes photographs of messages written in blood and paint and possibly lipstick on a mirror from an incident in Australia. Those are all the main similarities, but of course the last one, and certainly not least, is the whole trial is based on Amber defaming Johnny by telling stories of being married to an abusive villain. But very much like the Wendy theory suggests that the whole story is in Wendy's fantasies, and it's her painting herself out to be a traumatized heroine. Is that what we have here too in this Depp versus Heard trial?
It's quite possible.
The jury said yes, but I know some people still disagree.
I just, like I said before, I came up with my own conclusions after I was told about the bottle incident.
But yes, again, without making light of the situation, we just thought these similarities were too intriguing to not to share. So, in my personal opinion, this trial is a terribly sad affair all around. I think the evidence supports that Johnny, at worst, was a jerk to her at times and said some things that she should have left him for several times over. And Amber is clearly very troubled. Both of their situations are exasperated by substance dependencies. I do sincerely think it's possible Amber may have been abused at some point in her life by someone else. and maybe projecting these events on him. Maybe she even convinced herself these things happened the way she tells them. And I honestly wonder how psychedelics are influencing her memory and her ability to reason. I encourage everybody,
Not to use drugs.
don't do drugs. Have some compassion for Amber. I think in the worst case, she's very aware of her actions and is just lying for attention and profit, which it didn't get her. Like that backfired.
Well,
But I also think that, if that for someone to do that, something must have happened to that person that was really terrible at some point in their life. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but I think it still warrants a little bit of compassion.
well, I'm not trying to give her any compassion for whatever.
A lot of people aren't, but I say if you truly want cancel culture to end, you might need to fall on the sword and fight for someone you disagree with to keep working and making a living.
Yeah, that's kind of true because she has to come up with some way to pay off Johnny Depp.
You don't gotta like her, but she can still be an actress.
Yes.
She's not gonna profit from this unless she just plays a villain for the rest of her life. But
I see somewhere down the line there's going to be Austin Powers 4 coming out there, and Amber Heard is going to be either playing a role as Dr. Evil. I just want to say thanks for watching this video. This is a little bit of a discussionary video. Mostly it's from my wife's point of view on the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. Unfortunately, I really didn't get a chance to watch the trial as much as she did. I'm not really huge on trials. But from the information that I got from her, I just told her my opinions, and I think most of you guys probably have similar opinions that I have too on this trial. I do feel kind of bad for Amber Heard on some parts of it, but the other part of it, I also kind of feel that karma, baby. Karma. Anyway, this is Richard Stassi, and thank you for watching Tinker the Tales. And I'm all empty now. I mean, like, some people think, like, Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing, and there's a lot of references out there, but it doesn't really say he actually faked the moon landing or he did the moon landing or whatever it is. It's just that there's references out there, which, could refer to a conspiracy theory that people were coming up with in the 70s that the moon landing was fake anyway, and he was just taking advantage of the...
Okay, you've gone into the moon landing. This is
See?
why you can't talk about this.
This is why I can't talk about this anymore, because I go off the rails and off the topic here.